The White House has announced multiple updates when it comes to the conflict between Israel and Palestine, or at least on Palestine. They said that Israel has now agreed to effectively make official some humanitarian pauses that had been going on intermittently for some time. These will be daily 4-hour pauses in military operations in the area of Northern Gaza to allow people in select changing regions to move south, either to move to an area that is not under attack, or in more southern areas to potentially have some time to at least get out and get some aid before once again sheltering. A senior Israeli official appeared to confirm this, telling CNN that the Israelis are calling these tactical localized pauses that will shift from area to area on a daily basis. The neighborhood or area will be given several hours notice of the pause to allow people to travel for aid or relief. So that's, I guess, the closest we'll get based on White House pressure to some sort of extended ceasefire, which Israeli government officials continue to say is not going to happen. Biden had apparently asked Benjamin Netanyahu for these daily pauses, as well as an overall 3-day pause to allow for hostage negotiations. There's been no movement on that, but Biden has confirmed that he asked for the daily pauses. Netanyahu went on to say that there would be no ceasefire without the release of hostages. There was apparently an offer a couple of days ago for something like that, which was rejected by Netanyahu. So as of right now, that's the development. We have some additional statements by Anthony Blinken saying that they believe that there have been far too many deaths amongst Palestinian civilians. And there's headlines all over the place this morning that people have probably seen that the White House is growing more concerned about civilian deaths as we apparently pass 11,000 overall deaths. And the Secretary of State says that they believe that those numbers might actually be an underestimate. The White House is growing increasingly concerned. But anyway, a lot of updates. Brett, what do you make of it?
I mean, that's a lot of updates. I don't know, so I think when you ask people on the left there's I don't know how to respond to all of that stuff. So when you say it's an attack on Palestine, or on Gaza. Okay, here's my overall take on the situation. It is the fact that Hamas is using the entire population of Palestine as a human shield. People on the left definitely just try to ignore that as a fact. But that is a fact, and you have to acknowledge that that is absolutely 100% a tactic. In fact, pretty much the only tactic that Hamas can use to succeed. And that is a fact on the ground. And it very much frustrates me when people just ignore that that's happening. That said, you can't, as the Israeli government, Benjamin Netanyahu, you can't just keep killing civilians at such a huge rate for that long before you lose every bit of support that you have on the planet. Now, you can either eventually, and this is kind of the pattern that follows any kind of attack by Hamas on Israeli interests, right? When that happens, the Israeli government hits back way, way harder. What Hamas has said to the New York Times that it wants is a permanent state of war. Why? Because Hamas is losing. Because Hamas is losing the support of the Arab world as people like people like the Saudis are doing better business with Israel over time, as Egypt has better relationships with Israel over time, as all of the Sunnis get mad that the Shias are allying with Iran and Iraq. They kind of coalesce around Israel more and more, unless Israel fights back too hard in a way where the Pan-Arab alliance just kind of gets back together against them. Mm-hmm. And Benjamin Netanyahu's actions are doing that. But it drives me nuts when people are like, oh, shut up about the human shields. Like, that's what's happening. But and I say this to everybody, like, the people on the left do such a great job of identifying who in this conversation can be who's being left out, or who is being treated horribly, or what minorities are getting treated poorly, except when it comes to Jews. Like, I hate to break it to you, that same voice that goes into your mind when you're like, oh, we're having a conversation about boys and girls dating. I feel like we're alienating. There's some kind of heteronormative discussion going on here. You have to acknowledge the anti-Semitism that grows in there. You need to remember that there's tens, if not hundreds of millions of people in the world who, as you're having these discussions, are on the verge of saying, yeah, but the Jews suck. Let's get rid of them. Like, that's a fact. And you need to factor that in, and factor that in with every bit of your framing. That said, I will point you back to what I said earlier. We're like, yes, Israel, you're winning. You can't keep winning this way. It's bad for your own interests, but it is also wildly immoral.
Yeah, and I would argue that, you were sort of saying there you can't continue. I mean, I think in terms of public polling about what people think about the conflict, it's clear that it has already taken a massive toll on what people think about it. And I mean, just by running the numbers, it seems like, how could it not? I mean, like over 1,500 people were killed in the initial attack, one of the singularly most disgusting abhorrent actions in literally years. And now 10 times as many people have been killed in the reaction to it. Like, people are going to see that. And, even if initially the mainstream media is predisposed to present the story in a particular way, and I think there's even been some shifting of that, at a certain point, the numbers get just undeniable of how utterly horrific it is. And when the idea is that that's going to continue and perhaps accelerate, then yeah, I think people are going to respond to that. Some of the frustration that went into your comments, I don't know exactly everything that's been said or who you're referencing there. I don't deny the tactic of using human shields. Obviously, that doesn't mean that you can kill thousands of people. And the issue is that the truth of the fact that human shields are used can also be used to justify almost anything, even in instances where perhaps it was not accurate. The fact that it is done doesn't mean that it is always done in every instance. And it seems like the argument is in every case is that justifies whatever happens. In any event, the amount of deaths is absolutely horrific. I can't believe how fast we got from 10,000 to 11,000. And if the Secretary of State is saying that they think the number is an undercount, I don't know what data they're referencing there, but that's horrible. And so this is what we've got right now. We've got brief pauses for people to move. Reminder that there have been cases where routes that have been carved out for people to flee along have themselves be bombed. So there are civilians who are worried about that. There were reports out of one time when it had appeared that a blockade of a hospital had been broken, but then people fleeing, including doctors, were shot at. We don't know exactly who did the shooting, but then they had to flee back into the hospital. So even when this is being put out there as a potential solution for some of the civilians for limited time in limited areas, there's still a lot of concern that is not actually a guarantee that you might be safe.
Yeah, 4-hour pause is like, that's not what anyone's asking for. 4 hours is not a ceasefire.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.